Gate to Eden by Cathy Mcdavid. Narrated by Hugh Bradley. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims, and a flaming sword which turned every way, to keep the way of the tree of life. Genesis 3:24. Chapter 1. Edenville, Arizona, 1887. Thaddeus Newland didn't like prostitutes. He'd worked too hard and too long building his empire, only to risk losing it by succumbing to some dreadful disease acquired from a soiled dove. He did, however, like women, and partook of their pleasure as often as his pressing schedule allowed. Young women with long hair, ample curves, and clear skin were his preference, and innocent, if only in looks. No barroom whores ever found their way beneath his blankets. His secretary, Zachariah Forrester, had assumed the task of procuring this evening's entertainment, as he always did when the mood for companionship struck Thaddeus. Mr. Forrester recruited from the residences and ranches of whatever town they happened to be visiting. As times were tough and money tight, he seldom encountered any difficulty locating a willing female who fit his boss's exacting specifications. Then, like all good secretaries, he conveniently disappeared for several hours after escorting the young woman to the steps of Thaddeus's private railroad car. Neither did he ask any bothersome questions at the end of the night, regardless of the woman's disheveled condition. "Very nice," Thaddeus said, as he watched the pretty little thing standing in front of him slip the narrow sleeves of her camisole off her pale shoulders. Mr. Forrester had done well tonight, and Thaddeus considered giving his secretary a bonus.
"I ain't never been with a man like this before,"
the woman said shyly, lowering her eyes to the richly carpeted floor.
"You're my first, you know."
Thaddeus doubted the truth of her statement. She might not be a prostitute in the strictest sense of the word, but she'd certainly done this before. The large nipples, visible through the material of her camisole, and the roundness of her belly, attested to previous childbirth. Not that Thaddeus cared. In fact, he preferred experienced women, just not worldly. "You don't have to be nervous, my dear." He played along with her pretense. "I promise to be gentle." And he would be gentle, until the end. She lifted one stocking-clad foot and placed it on the edge of the pinstriped settee, near to his leg. Thaddeus felt himself stirring, and smiled. He might be past his prime, and have only half the hair atop his head he did at 20, but he'd not yet lost his ability to perform. Reaching out a large hand, he stroked her smooth and surprisingly muscular calf. "Why don't we see what we can do about removing this stocking?" The woman, he couldn't quite remember her name, pressed a knuckle to her lips.
"It were a long walk here from my place. Can I use the chamber pot first?"
It clearly pained her to have to ask for the convenience. "Of course. It's in there." He pointed toward a door leading to his sleeping quarters. She ducked behind the door, quiet as a mouse. No sense wasting time, Thaddeus thought, and kicked off his boots. Next, he stood, removed his pants, and tossed them aside. They landed haphazardly on the elegant cherrywood rocker he'd had shipped all the way from Boston last year. By the time he completed undressing, he began to wonder what was detaining his lovely guest. Wearing only his long underwear, he walked to the door of his sleeping quarters and knocked. "Are you all right, my dear?" His only answer was a soft, scuffling sound. "Hello?" He knocked again, and the brass knob twisted. Thaddeus smiled and moved away from the opening door. "There you are."
"So I am."
The door swung wide, and the smile
Sample complete. Ready to continue?